Welcome to Wealthy and Wise with Kerry Sainsbury. This is where we uncover the secrets to financial success and personal growth. I'm Kerry Sainsbury, your host on this journey to mastering wealth and wisdom. Each episode, we'll dive deep into practical tips, insightful discussions, and inspiring stories from experts and thought leaders. Get ready to transform your mindset, elevate your financial IQ, and live a life of abundance. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode on Wealthy and Wise with Kerry Sainsbury. Today, I think I always say I'm excited, but today I'm extra excited as I have the lovely Rebekah Jade here, who is an amazing money mindset coach. Rebekah, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. I'm glad you're excited because I'm also excited to be here.
Well, I was on your
You
podcast.
were. Yes, we did. We literally, it's funny because you were talking about, creating your podcast, and here she is. She's birthed, she's out there. Look at her. It's amazing.
And I've got you on here now.
Yeah. Cross collaboration.
I know. So tell us, look, I always ask, my first question is obviously tell us a little bit about yourself, your journey, what you do.
For sure, for sure. Let me take everyone back in time because I love to give a full picture. I'm a full picture type of woman. So let me take you back in time to growing up. Growing up, I grew up in a pretty average household. We lived in a pretty average neighborhood. I had, my mom, my dad, and I was the second oldest of 5 siblings. And my mum was a stay-at-home mum to us 5 children. And then my dad owned his own trucking company. And so he would often work super long hours. He would do sometimes interstate work. And he would only usually, if he was home, he would only take a Sunday off. And we would go to church with mum, and then dad would be at home, working on his truck. And I remember growing up in this household, and just from such a young age, the dynamic of my mom and dad's relationship, they would fight a lot. And majority of the fighting was over money. It was over, he was always working so hard, and my mom was spending the money, and he wasn't happy with how she was spending it. And he would say things like, that's it. Like, I'm going to file for divorce and I'm selling the house. And obviously, I understand now as an adult that people do the best with what they have at the time. But as a child, I created this fear of, oh my gosh, we're going to be on the streets. Like, what if my parents divorce, and what if we lose everything? And it was this kind of subconscious fear that played out for many, many years to come. And so growing up, I was 11 and my parents got divorced. And honestly, I was relieved. When my mom told me, I was like, yes, because you guys just aren't a great match. That's literally what I said to her as an 11-year-old. I was like, oh my God, yay. And so the years that came, my mom, she fell in love with another man. And this man, he was fighting his own demons, but he was very physically abusive, emotionally abusive on us children. And being the second eldest, I would always stand up for myself. And he very much secluded my mum and us kids from my dad. And so there was many years where I didn't get to speak to my dad. He secluded my mum from all of her friends. And so I knew that something wasn't right. And I was at that time, I was in high school, so I could kind of understand families and, a healthy family dynamic between a parent and another parent and children. And so I understood that things were happening in that household that just weren't healthy. And so I used to challenge him a lot, and he did not like that. He didn't like the fact that I was standing up to him because a lot of my other siblings were quite younger. And so I stood up to him a lot. And then he eventually manipulated my mum into agreeing to kick me out of home. So at the age of 16, I literally had to put my stuff in garbage bags, and I moved into a share house with complete strangers in Logan. And here I was, this 16-year-old. And at that time, I dropped out of school as well. I dropped out the year before at 15 because of my mental health with the home life. I just could not study and submit assignments and tests with what was happening at home with the abuse. And so here I was, this 16-year-old. I was working every single night at a sandwich shop. And then during the day, I was going to get my studies. I was going to get my certification in beauty therapy. And so I did that. And I eventually then, being 16, young and beautifully dumb at the time. And also I didn't really have anyone in my corner. I met a boy and I just clung to him because he was the only kind of form of safety. And it was like, oh my gosh, someone sees me, and he wasn't, physically hurting me or anything. So I was like, wow, like he really loves me and he really cares for me. And so over the years, I got very comfortable in this relationship, and I really lost my sense of self-worth, and I lost, my financial independency, being that I was kicked out of home so young. I was very independent financially. I kind of lost that. And I stayed in that relationship. There was lots of cheating. There was lots of lying. There was all sorts of toxicity in that relationship, but I continued to stay. And I was in that for 9 years, and we actually ended up getting married. I thought that if I could get married to him, he would change, and then I thought if I could give him a baby, he would change. And so I was living out this white picket fence sort of lifestyle. I was working a normal job, and I was married, and I had this 11-month-old child, and life was okay, but it wasn't great. Like, it was good, but it wasn't great. And there was a lot of layers of toxicity. There was a lot of things happening under the surface. But for the life of me, I just couldn't bring myself to muster up enough courage and self-worth to actually leave, because that felt so incredibly scary, being a single mom and trying to afford everything. So eventually the relationship completely crumbled, and he was the one that left. And, what I will say is he's a fantastic dad. So we have a great now co-parenting relationship, and we get on really well. And I have thanked him for leaving. I was like, thank you for leaving, because my life is so much more magical, which I'll get into in a sec. But at the time when he left me for someone that was 10 years younger, a woman that he worked with. And I was suddenly faced with all of the debt. So when he left, he literally left. He was like, I'm done. That's it. Like, you pay for the mortgage, you pay for the personal loans, you pay for this, you pay for this. I'm out. Have fun. And so here I was, this single mom. I was working part-time. I had a little side business on the side in the network marketing profession that I was trying to build up, because I didn't want to be a full-time, 9 to 5 working mom. I wanted to have time with my daughter. So I had this little business. It was making me about $250 a week working. My daughter was in daycare, and I was starting this divorce process with my lawyers and trying to keep my head above water, trying to pay for the bills and whatnot. And so the divorce, throughout the months that followed, it was getting finalized, and we got the parenting stuff under control. And then one day I was walking around the grocery store, and I looked at my phone, and there was a call from my lawyers coming through. And my daughter was in the front. She was eating a banana in the front of the trolley, just happy as. And I'm in the pet food aisle looking for cat food for my cat. And I answer the phone, and they say, hey, like, we're getting really close to finalizing your divorce. However, we need to finalize the financials. That's the last thing that's really tying you two together, you and your ex-husband, and we need to get this sorted. And I said, okay, like, what does that look like? And they said, well, you're going to have to, divide the debt, essentially. However, there's an issue here. The other side, the other party, your ex-husband, has made it very clear to his legal team that he is not paying for any of the debt. And at the point in time, the house that we had bought had seriously depreciated in value. And it ended up to be about $60,000 worth of debt. Now, I was a single mom. And before this, previously, I tried to go to the bank to see if they would let me have the house, as a single woman. And they wouldn't. They said, like, you do not have enough income coming in. We just can't let you service that loan. So I said to them, like, I have tried to see if I could do this on my own, and there's not much help. My parents don't have any sort of money to help me. Like, I'm really on my own. What's my options? And they said, well, you would have to pay for the debt. If you took it on, you would have to have the money to pay him, out and do all the things. Like, you have to have the money there. And I said, okay, well, I don't. And I don't know how I would ever get this much money to move this debt into my name. And they said, you could do that, but you would have to sue him. Like, you could take it on, but you would eventually have to sue him to get at least 50% back. That on average will take around 2 years in court. That means we're going to charge you more money, obviously legal fees. And also too, mentally, it's a long game. And we just don't know if you have it in you to go through that. And I said, yeah, I definitely don't have it in me. I was, on the edge of burnout and just completely breaking down. And they said, your other option is bankruptcy. And that word, I just heard it and tears was just rolling down my cheeks, standing in the pet food aisle, looking at my daughter, thinking to myself, like, how the fudge did I get here? Like, how did I get here in this position? Like, seriously. And now, this little girl's going to grow up with mom who's bankrupt. And I created all these stories about myself, all these stories, not good enough. Who am I? And so for many months, for about 6 months, I didn't make the decision. I just kept kind of ignoring the calls. And then the lawyers sent me an email and they're like, we really need to get this sorted. This is like, come on, you got to make your decision back. So I asked them, what does it look like? And they said, well, your bank accounts will be frozen and whatever money you have in there, the debitors they'll take it as they're allowed to. Your house will get repossessed the moment that you file for bankruptcy. Be prepared, because if the bank really wanted to send someone over there to change the locks, they can. It's now theirs. Your car will get repossessed because it's tied to a personal loan. And so you really need to make plans now to leave, to start afresh, to find another home, to find another alternative vehicle, because that's it. So I did. I found a little 2-bedroom apartment on the Gold Coast, which is where I live now, which was an hour and a half from where I was living. I was living more like in the bushlands. So I moved down to the coast and I found this tiny little 2-bedroom apartment, and it was mine. No one could take it away. I was renting, but it was mine. And it was so small that I was still building, avidly building this health and wellness business on the side. And I had my little table, my desk in the kitchen, because there was no other space for me to put my freaking desk to build my business. And I did. The day that I filed for bankruptcy was the day that I left, and I packed the little belongings I had left into boxes and, fell to my knees in shame, in devastation. This is what it was. And I closed the doors behind me, had my daughter on my hip, and I was like, that's it. We're going to start fresh and we're going to keep going. And so for a few years, it was really hard financially on us. I was on government support, still trying to build this business, doing the absolute most. And there were days where when I say we, it was just my daughter and I, we couldn't afford to eat. We were scrounging around in the pantry, and I was making, expired pasta and pasta sauce for dinner. And that had to do until more money came through. And so what I did have, though, I didn't have any money, but I did have a lot of time. And so I decided to research money and study money. Like, what is this thing? Because this thing has left me in pieces. I feel worthless. I've got nothing to show for anything. Like, everything has gone. My car did get repossessed. Like, there's nothing left in my life, just my daughter and I. And I was researching and learning more about how it works and how it's an energy and it's a resource and it's a tool. And I learned more about our mindset and how we create our realities. And I was sitting there and I come across, this information that we create our realities with our mindset. And so I was like, okay, if I created this reality of being bankrupt and losing my house with my mindset, where did this stem from? And I closed my eyes and I just let myself lead myself to wherever in my thoughts. And suddenly I took myself back in time when I was little, and my dad was threatening my mom and he was saying, I'm going to sell the house. And I remember that feeling of, oh my God,
Wow.
I'm going to be homeless. Yeah, I'm going to be homeless. And I was like, holy crap, that was a subconscious fear. I had no idea it was running. It's a subconscious fear that I have been so afraid of for years and years and years. I have brought it into my reality so that I could face the fear, so that I know that it's not going to kill me. So in a way, I definitely 100% created that reality. I definitely had a part to play. And I was like, but you know what? I'll be damned if this is like my final destination. And every morning I would get up and I would tell myself, your current situation is not your final destination. Your current situation is not your final destination. Like, when my accounts got frozen and money got taken out, and when I was driving around this car and the indicator was hanging off and I couldn't even open the car door, like, it was just a mess. And I would just tell myself over and over and over. And I would tell myself that this is going to make for a great story. This is going to make for a great story. So I started studying money. I started learning about money. And so the 3 years that I was bankrupt, I was very capped on what I could make and how far I could scale my income. And so I kind of, played with the rules of the bankruptcy. And I was like, okay, I'm going to stay home because I couldn't travel, internationally. I had to get permission. So I was like, right, I'm going to really focus on everything. And I did. And then 12 months after my bankruptcy ended, I pivoted my business, my health and wellness business. I thought, I actually think I have a lot to teach about money. And I'm the most qualified person to teach about money because I'm the one that's lost it all. And I'm the most, financially effed person in society, right? I'm bankrupt. Like this is the bottom of the barrel.
Doesn't get any worse, right, in your head.
Yeah,
But then that's what makes you who you are now. And now look at you. We're obviously on a podcast about to talk about how you've completely changed your world. And you know what, I was listening before, and even before you said it, your childhood, like it's so crazy from what happens to your childhood
mm-hmm.
and how subconsciously you have to be so careful that you don't
Yes.
create it for yourself. But then you've done that. And then from that, then you're able to sort of teach and have learned from those
Exactly.
mistakes, which I just think is so cool, right? Like, as you said, what other better person to have hit rock bottom, literally the worst, like bankruptcy is the scariest place you could have been financially, right?
100%. It was the bottom of the barrel. And I had all these stories. Like, I'm not a financial advisor. I didn't even finish high school, but I was like, but wait, but I'm just a normal woman who was divorced and a single mom who was bankrupt and broke by the age of 25. So if anyone can speak to anyone about money, it's me. And then when my bankruptcy ended, I literally launched my business all about money. I launched my podcast. And then within 12 months, I made over $212,000 cash in the bank as an actual business owner. And that was like the proof in the pudding that everything I had learned and everything that I was teaching was so impactful. And then it became bigger. My business wasn't just about me. It was now, okay, this woman's over here and she's about to lose everything. How can I help her? And this person's over here and they're dealing with their bills, laying awake at night, and they're not a present mom. How can I help her? And it just suddenly this mission grew and grew and grew and grew. And that's kind of where we are to present day, is having this incredible, beautiful company that literally teaches women how to magnetize money towards them so that they have more freedom, so that they have more opportunity.
Wow. Let's dive into that because this is so interesting, right? Our mind is so powerful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So let's dive into that. What are some tips, I guess? What are some things that you've seen that, that we can do to change this? To
Definitely.
monetize money.
Definitely. So the
Yeah.
first thing is, money is just energy. So that's the basic fundamentals of money. What happens from time to time is we can pedestal money. We can make it this whole big thing that it's not. And when we put things on pedestals, we put ourselves beneath it. And when you put something above you, it makes you unable to reach it. You're creating that much distance. So the first thing with money is just looking at it for what it is. It's an energetic resource. We live in an energetic universe. We're all energy right now. It's like if we were to put this, water bottle under a microscope, it would be vibrating at an energetic level. So it's very just quantum physics, normal stuff. And so money is the same. And it's just a tool that we use to exchange things. And what I have learned over the years is that the more that I can submit energy into the world, the more that I can receive. So the more that I put my work out there, the more that I show up for others, the more that I give back, the more that I naturally receive. And so everything holds energy. And in the way of also too, looking at our past as children, most of us are walking around with blueprints with money and beliefs about money and thoughts about money that we actually didn't create. So what happens is, as babies, when they come into the world, they're perfect. Like, they are absolutely perfect. They don't know right from wrong. They don't know up from down, but they learn through their parents. If your parents says, don't touch that stove, that's hot, you're not going to touch the stove because it's hot and you don't want to burn your hand. Your parent says, don't cross the street without looking for the green man. Well, then you're not going to cross the street until you wait for the green man. So what happens is we're creating all these realities, and especially around money. Your parent will say to you something like, money doesn't grow on trees, or they'll say you have to work really hard for money. You have to sacrifice for money. So suddenly you have all these beliefs. Okay, I got to work hard for money. So guess what? You create the reality, I have to work hard for money. If you've seen your parents sacrifice, maybe they sacrifice family time, well, you're going to grow up thinking the same thing. In order to be rich or wealthy or have money, I have to sacrifice. That then becomes your reality, and you start living this life based on your parents' beliefs around money. But there is so much proof around us that you get to literally create the rules to your reality. So who says that you have to work hard for money? Because if we really look at that idea, and if we look at that belief, for example, people in construction work extremely hard, they're laborers, but yet they don't get paid a whole lot of money. CEOs sitting at desks get paid more. If we look at people in hospitality, they're working till 2, 3 a.m. at crowded bars, getting, abused and whatnot. And yet they are working on minimum wage. Hairdressers stand up in a hair salon all day, going back and forth, putting foils in hair and cutting hair. But again, they get minimum wage. So it's like, who actually dictated that you have to work hard for money? Because it couldn't be furthest from the truth. So I teach people how to identify their blueprint. We go back in time and we look at the beliefs, because your beliefs are formed as a child around money between the ages of 0 to 8. That's when they're formed. So often I'll look at someone's reality with money and say, okay, what's going on? And they'll tell me. And then I say, okay, so which parent did that? Or which parent said that? Or which parent showed you that? Because they either did it, so they either showed you or they said it. And so then we figure out, and then suddenly my clients are like, holy shit, this isn't even my reality. I'm just living out someone else's reality. And then from there, we create new beliefs, which then creates a new reality.
When things sort of happen to us as well, right? Like a divorce, for example, and then you have, I guess things can things happen to you like a divorce, and then it repeats, or you feel like it's going to repeat. Like I see that a bit where it's something, it's like trauma, right? It's like PTSD or something like that, where you fear that that's going to reoccur each time.
Yes, because sometimes people create comfort in the known. So what will happen with money, especially, they'll create scenarios over and over and over because that's comfortable. So if someone is, say, used to living in the paradigm of money comes in on a Thursday night from their pay, and then come Sunday, they've spent it all. That's comfortable for them. That's a pattern. They're living in this pattern. Money comes in, within 2 days, it's completely spent. And even though it is quite uncomfortable, but what would be more uncomfortable to do is actually to say, okay, put some aside and don't touch it. The uncomfortability with that of put some money in an account and do not touch it is so uncomfortable that they would rather create the same pattern over and over and over again, because that's what is known. So if you want to create a different reality with money, well, then you have to do things differently as well. You have to take different action steps. But a lot of the time we create these scenarios over and over because it's what's known to us. It's
and
like,
we're scared of change, aren't we? Like that comfort
100%.
sometimes is a lot more safer than pushing through these barriers to make our
100%.
lives. Yeah. So with like, what are your thoughts on sort of like, obviously there's manifestation, but then obviously you can also manifest incorrect, right? Like if you're.
We're always manifesting.
Yeah.
So something that a lot of manifestation teachers don't teach is that you are always manifesting. And the reason being is your thoughts and your beliefs are creating your reality. So we have on average about 80,000 thoughts a day, but only 20,000 of them we clock, like we actually acknowledge them and think about them further. But the more that you think something over and over and over and over and over again, it becomes a belief. You suddenly are believing this thought. So that's where it becomes a belief. Your belief becomes your reality. So whatever you believe about money, good, bad, and whatever the third, you then actually start to create that in your reality. So we can definitely attract, we can manifest, bills and all sorts of things. So for example, something that I tell my clients, and I teach money in a very unconventional, untraditional way. So it's very different to a lot of other people that are teaching it out there. But when my clients have savings, I teach them to save for abundance, not for lack. Now, what I mean by this is when my clients want to save money, if they're saving for a rainy day, I can guarantee you they will get rainy days because you're setting that intention. You're quite literally manifesting that with money.
That's what we're taught. Like I know from my parents, like you're taught put away 30% for a rainy day. And then you think you're so smart because you're doing that and you're being, extra precautious. And
Yeah.
then it creates it.
It does. And then you wonder why the car's broken down for the fifth time or the washing machines that are going out the door. You wonder why. It's people say put 3 to 6 months worth of income aside in case you lose your job. Well, I can guarantee you're going to lose your job because you're setting that intention. So yes, we can literally manifest negative things into our life, just like we can manifest positive things. So I teach my clients to put money aside for abundance. It's like, what do you want the money aside to do for you? Do you want it to book a holiday? Do you want it to pay down your debt quicker? Do you want it to upgrade your car? And instead we work towards the positive so that we're moving further away from the negative with money.
And how can we, I know on a podcast of yours I've listened to, and I started doing this myself, just to get those negative thoughts out of my head, because obviously, as you said, there's so many every day going through our heads. What are some tips that we can do? I know I learned that every time you feel like you've got a negative thought, you need to switch that and just repeatedly say that to yourself and switch it.
Yes,
yeah,
definitely. So what I love to do each day is I love to set time aside, and I call it contemplation time. This is where you have no distractions. So everything's off. And I love to do this in the car because in the car, I'm kind of alone. And so I turn everything off and I just sit and I contemplate my thoughts. So I actually question, why am I thinking the way that I'm thinking? So contemplation, thinking is just thinking. It's like, oh, the weather's like this. But then to contemplate, well, then to ask yourself, but why do I think the weather's like this? So that's what contemplation is. And so what I do is I let my thoughts run about money and I let them run through. And I'm human. I have thoughts like, oh my gosh, there's not enough money for wages. There's not enough money for bills. There's not enough money for this, that, whatever. And then I'll sit there and I will contemplate it. And I ask myself this question, is that ultimately true? Is that ultimately true? Because our brain's job is to keep us safe. That is our reptilian's brain's job, is to keep us safe. It is to keep us safe. And it's also to keep us comfortable. So my brain will tell me all sorts of cooked rubbish to try and keep me safe and comfortable. Now, what it's telling me is not factual. It's not truth. It's just decided that it's suddenly right. Like it knows everything. So I ask myself, is that ultimately true? So for example, going back to I have to work hard for money. So that was a belief that I could have taken on from my dad. I did take on for many years. You got to work hard because I actually seen him work really hard and for us to just barely get by. So I took on that belief, but then I asked myself, well, is it ultimately true? And that's where I found, pitfalls in my belief. Okay, well, if that's really true, then why are gardeners not getting paid the same amount as CEOs? They're working really hard in gardens, in the heat, in the sun. Like, why? Why are people in hospitality, waitresses, why are they not getting paid heaps? They're constantly on their feet. They're running back and forth with hot dishes. And that's where I was like, well, hang on, this is not ultimately true. And so when I ask myself, is it ultimately true? Then I have the opportunity to tell myself a new story, because that's all that this is. It's stories that we tell ourselves that we believe, and we go out into the world with those beliefs. So then I say, okay, what do I want to think about money? Well, I believe that money gets to come to me easily. I believe that money gets to flow to me and I don't have to hustle. I don't have to burn out. I don't have to sacrifice time with my family. I truly believe that. And just by me taking on that new belief, what happens is then I start to find evidence in my world of that. So suddenly I'll find evidence of other women, in my industry, and they're working a few hours a day. They've got people to support them and they're making 6, 7, 8 figures, 10 figures, like they're millionaires, billionaires. So you can find those, that evidence of proof by just simply telling yourself a new story. And then the evidence eventually shows up.
So you switch it from that negative thought and then switch it to that, whatever it can be that's positive, switch it to whatever it in your head that will make it positive, and then you sort of open yourself up.
Definitely.
That abundance.
That's
simple.
I know that's the bane of my work. Like when people work with me, I'm like, it's that simple, but it's also not, because we're up against like how many years of childhood conditioning, we're up against, self-worth issues, we're up against, and a lot of the time too, you're up against things that you don't actually know are playing a part. So a lot of it is unconscious, and a lot of it, for example, I've had a client work with me before and she couldn't understand why she would always spend her money so quickly, and it would always go like so quickly. And it was, you know, a childhood situation. When she was a child, literally someone took money from her piggy bank. And so she now, as soon as money hits her bank account, she spends it quicker because she has this internal subconscious fear, someone's going to take it, so I have to quickly spend it.
Someone's going to spend it.
Mm.
And I think, you know, as I've grown as well, and the business has been great for me to have staff, but as I've grown, it seems like then you find something like the next sort of issue to keep resolving. So I feel like I'm personally, it's up and up and up, and then it gets more stressful, or it's a new lesson to learn, and then something else that you become aware of in yourself that you do, and then you have to work on it.
There's so many layers. Like
Yeah.
there's so many layers to this. And I think with money mindset work in particular, the way that I teach it is it's life work, you know, and I'll use the analogy of a shower. You don't just shower once and then suddenly you're clean forever and you never have to shower again. You shower in the morning, and then what happens is you get sweaty and grimy from the day, and you know, you have a shower before bed. Hopefully you have a shower before bed and you wash it all off. That's the same with the money mindset work that I teach. Like, yes, I can give you this potent, powerful, you know, episode, or if you work with me a one-to-one call, or if you do my programs, like, yeah, I can give you stuff in the moment, but then you're going to go out into the real world, and then someone's going to say something to you, and you might check your bank account and a bill came out, or you got a bill, and all these things are piling up, and energetically you've got grime and you've got sweat. And so you need to go do the work again and have that shower and then wash it off. You know, it's a constant evolution. And the more that we grow too, the more that things come up, especially in business. Like the more money you make, you know, we all want all of this money, but then when we get it, we're like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do with it? If it was illegal to have this much money, what if like the ATO come for me, and suddenly you've got all these fears and you're kind of like, please get rid of it because this actually feels illegal, even though you received.
Yeah, or it feels more scary, right? It's like, oh my God, now I've made the money, the ATO, like, and then there's more stress that comes with it, seem to have to work on. It's crazy.
Yeah, so that's like literally the thing. It's like we want this money, but then when we get it, if we haven't done the work, we will self-sabotage. And so there's a statistic that 70% of people that have won the lottery and become millionaires end up in a worse position than when they didn't win the lottery. And the reason being is they actually didn't get to acclimatize to that financial set point. They didn't actually get to that set point where they trusted themselves enough to handle that money. So what do? They spend it, they get rid of it, they get in a whole heap of debt, they don't pay the taxes on it and whatever, because they just want to get rid of it quick. But obviously this is on a subconscious level. They're not thinking they're trying to get rid of it. They're out there partying, have the time of their lives. But then within a few years, they've got nothing to show for it and everything's left the bank account. And the reason being is because they didn't actually embody the person that had money. They didn't handle it correctly. They didn't know where to move it. They didn't get the right support. They didn't get the right advice. And they're just out here living life. But what they're actually doing is self-sabotaging and trying to get rid of it.
Haven't done the work beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
And you've just, we were just chatting before, a new qualification for yourself as well.
Yes.
LP, did you say it?
NLP, yes. I'm an NLP practitioner and hypnotherapist, which is exciting. So it just allows me to go deeper into people's emotions, because sometimes money can completely dysregulate our emotions, and we can tie a lot of our self-worth to money. So if we have a little bit, we tell ourselves all these stories. If we have a lot, we're happy. But then the moment that it leaves the bank account or we have to pay something, we're back to telling ourselves these stories of I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy enough. Who am I? I always F it up. So what happens is I have the modalities and the tools now to actually go deeper on that emotional scale, so that we can start detaching emotions from money. So we can start seeing money as just being money. It's just a tool. And instead we can start to work on the emotions as a completely separate entity.
That's fantastic. And I guess with hypnotherapy as well, like that would then hit the subconscious, right? So that is what you mean, that it goes sort of deeper, so then it's out of our control. So it's when we're under hypno, then that would obviously release those issues that we don't even realize happens in our subconscious.
Yeah, you create whole new habits and patterns, which is the most important part, because what happens is when we have a thought and when we think about it so much, like I said, it becomes a belief. And then we go out into the world with that belief and we create habits and patterns around that belief. So if the belief is, I'm not good enough with money, we will create a pattern of not being good enough with money just to prove that we're not good enough with money. So the hypnosis really allows us to go deeper on that and create new habits, break old habits. So it's really about creating different habits and patterns in our life. So we're not doing the same thing over and over again.
And I think for me personally, it's those negative thoughts or that fear. So I think having the affirmations, and I know listening to your podcast, as I said, every time I have those negative thoughts now, it's like, no, you're doing it again, Kerry, listen to yourself. And I think on one podcast you said, try for one day not to think one negative thought.
Yeah.
And that really worked because I was like, wow, like how many negative thoughts do you have, lady? Like wow. Like I realized how negative I was without actually realizing.
Definitely. One more day. Like that's what I say to myself is just one more day. If I can just go one more day without, these thoughts, or if I have these thoughts, that's okay, but clock them, like actually notice that they're there. So rather than just living my life as, an NPC, like a non-playing character, be a playing character and start to clock my thoughts. And when they're coming in, don't just let them run rampant. Instead, go, hang on, is this ultimately true? And then what story do I want to tell myself instead? Because we all have the thoughts, they all come in, we all have fears. This is what makes us human. We have emotions, we have fears, we self-sabotage. But when you're living life blindly to it, especially with money, that's when it can become disastrous. Whereas if you're aware of what's going on, just simply being aware creates a new pattern, it creates new habits, which creates a new reality.
Super interesting, isn't it? Well, we're obviously, thank you so much. I've learned so much personally myself. Thank you so much for coming on. Where can the listeners contact you? What's the best way of contacting you?
Yeah, definitely. My Instagram. So my Instagram holds so much value. It's Rebekah Jade _. I also have a website, www.RebekahJade.com. I forget that I have a website because it's fairly new. So I forget that, but my podcast is linked in there, my programs, and a bit of information about myself as well as a coach. So I'm all over the socials, and you can just message me at any point. And like, I love connecting. So you could come to me with, anything, saying this is my situation. What do you recommend? I'm all for helping people that are willing to put both hands up and say, hey, this is where I'm at. What do you recommend? And I have a number of different products. Like my podcast is free. I've got a membership, which is less than, a cup of coffee a day. Like there's so many different things that I can help people with. And I've structured it for that reason. Is it's really important to me as a coach is to help the older version of me, the one that didn't have enough money, is to make sure that there are my services and products out there, because I was that person that couldn't afford a whole heap of money to learn about money.
And I think it's just beautiful that, we can give back as well, isn't it? It's lovely.
Definitely.
The things we learn and we can give back. And as you said, it's you have to want to be able to change and grow, right? Like a lot of people I see that it's comfortable, right, to stay. But if you want to take those first steps, it just happens.
Yeah, you've got to make a move, because where you're at in your life right now, it's gotten you to this point, and that's all well and good. And maybe you're comfortable and maybe you're good, but good isn't great. And I believe that there's always that next level of potential and there's that next level of learning. But in order to create different results, you have to create different steps for yourself.
You want to make the change, you've got to take those steps. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure. We will chat soon.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us today on Wealthy and Wise with Kerry Sainsbury. Let's continue to grow together in wealth and wisdom. Until next time, remember to sprinkle kindness, share wisdom, and embrace every opportunity. Stay tuned and stay fabulous.